Work besties, welcome to today's video. We're going to talk about building work habits that work for you to help you optimize your work days in a way that feels attainable. So I have 6 things that have really helped me within my work days, help me have my work days work for me, and I'm going to share those with you here. So starting off strong with number 1 is starting every day with a plan. I never go into a work day completely blind. I always start my day before I look at my emails, before I look at before I start diving into work, I always sit down and I go, okay, what do I need to complete today? Looking at my must-dos versus my can-dos. And then I come up with some sort of a plan of these are the things I know I need to achieve. These are the things if I have time I need to achieve. Everything else is not relevant today. And yes, I know things do come up throughout the workday. Of course, we need to be flexible within this, but having a structured plan helps me optimize my time a lot more and kind of know what my day looks like so I know where I'm headed instead of having to finish a task and then be like, what's next? What do I work on? Because I find when that happens, I end up losing a lot of time in the what do I do next? You kind of get in this like paralysis of like, oh my gosh, I have all of these things, like where do I start? So starting every day with a plan, deciding what matters the most within your day as well. There's things that are more urgent versus things that maybe they can wait until tomorrow, maybe deadlines that you have to hit today or a communication that you have to have with someone. And so just understanding how the scope of your day looks before you really dive into your day, I have found to be so impactful. Another note on this one is prioritizing your high impact work. I believe the saying is 80% of your results come from 20% of your work. Everyone has a scope of work that is, quite broad, but only a little bit of that work is like your most impactful work, I find. And when someone shared this with me, I was like, wait, is that true? And I started looking at my day to day, and there were a lot of things that were almost like filler, not as important, not as impactful, but the 20% of my work that was super impactful, once I started to really prioritize those tasks throughout the day, I noticed that I had a way bigger output and kind of like trickled into the rest of my work. So maybe start to identify what your 20% of work is that has the greatest impact on your work days. Number 2, and this goes back to kind of planning for your day, is breaking tasks into smaller tasks. I think one of the hardest things to get started on a task is when it feels too overwhelming. So if your first task on completing a bigger task is to break that task into smaller segments, that's always where I like to start. Removing any, resistance of barrier to entry to get that work done. And that could just be, looking at a task, and if it's so large and you look at it and you're like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm intimidated, I don't want to start it, I don't know where to start it. So I always take the first step of a task is breaking it down into very bite-sized manageable pieces to remove that resistance for me to actually start it. This third one takes a little bit of time to get used to, but starting to work with your energy levels throughout the day. There are times in my day where I have a way higher focus, higher energy, more creativity. And then there's times of the day where I'm not as creative, my focus is lacking a little bit. And so in those times where I do have higher energy and greater focus, I like to do tasks that require greater focus or more creative thinking or more deep diving into things. And then the times of day, which is usually for me towards the afternoon, where my focus starts to dwindle a little bit, I'll save the mundane tasks, the routine tasks, the admin work, kind of the mindless work for those parts of the day. So when you start to work and schedule your day in a way that works with how your energy is throughout the day, you'll notice you can be a lot more effective and productive because you're making your work for you and making your work in alignment with how your work day feels. This could also be, something you think about when it comes to meetings. Of course, we can't control every single meeting that we have and when people are available and when meetings come into our calendars. However, there's definitely times of the day and days of the week even that if I'm scheduling a meeting, I give those days and times kind of top priority because I know that is when I'm most effective in meetings. And I try to just stack all my meetings within that kind of segment of my week or my day. Getting to know these things about yourself can also just give yourself a better insight into why the days feel like they do or why some moments feel very productive, why some other moments you're sitting there like, am I even accomplishing anything? Like I feel like I'm trying, but I feel like nothing's really sticking. Understanding kind of how you ebb and flow throughout the day and trying to align that as much as possible with work has been a very impactful tool for me that I've really dove into in this last year. Number 4 is time blocking. I talk about this all the time. It is one of my favorite tools where my whole day is time blocked out. So any deep focus work I need to do, I actually allocate a time block within my calendar for that, detailing, focus time of task A, And then it has an end time. And I work on that as much as I can throughout that time, and then I move on. I time block in my breaks, I time block, obviously meetings get time blocked into a calendar as well. But anything I need to do that day, especially those like bigger tasks, the really deep focus ones, I completely put in my calendar, it's blocked out, I'm on DND. I also put in time blocks for email checking. I found that it's really disturbing or disruptive to your workday when you're trying to focus on something and then you're like, email popped in, and a lot of our natural tendency is to go look at the email, look at the communication, look at the Teams message that came in. And there have been very few, if not zero, maybe one time where an email came in or a message came in and it was truly like I needed to jump on it in that moment. It takes a lot for us to task switch. I think it takes 15 minutes to get focused into a task, or 15 minutes of focus to get into kind of a flow state with a task. But once we're pulled out of that, whether that's an email coming through, it's gonna take us time to get reallocated back into that task and refocused in it. And so I try as much as possible to save my email checking, my communications for actually a time block in my day. So let's say from 1 to 2 p.m., that's when I'm checking and responding to emails. And for that full hour, that's all I'm doing. I'm not hopping from this spreadsheet to this document to my emails. I'm just responding to all my communications. Anything that comes in after that, great. I'm not looking at it. Maybe I have a small time block at the end of my day, from like 4 to 4:20 to check my email again to see if anything came in that I needed to address before the end of my workday. But using time blocks for focus time and email communications and scheduling in those breaks is really, really important. The next one is to strive for consistency and not necessarily perfection. So as you're implementing any of these habits, as you are going about your workday, you're establishing routines, of course, we're gonna have to adjust and things are gonna change and come up that we don't really anticipate, but we're just trying to be consistent. We're not trying to make things perfect here. We're just trying to find a consistent cadence of work that works for us, however that looks for you. And so coming back to this idea of, what's your exception and what's your rule? So your routine, your consistency, that's kind of your rule day to day that you kind of go by. Of course, exceptions are going to come up, but our default is always kind of coming back to that rule. I think it can feel very overwhelming when we're constantly trying to become better or make things work better for us. It's like, just have a framework and stick to that for a consistent period of time. There's no need to continuously be like, I need to get better, I need to get better, I need to get better, and constantly changing things up. There's so much power in consistency. And so if I can offer any piece of advice, get consistent. Don't strive for that perfection, because the perfection doesn't exist. And once you reach that point that you thought would be perfection, it's not going to be perfection anymore, because you're already going to raise the bar up to something else. And this last one is ending your day with some sort of recap, writing notes maybe, of just any important things that you want to pick up tomorrow, anything that, maybe it's a task that you need to make sure is allocated time for tomorrow, just kind of leaving your future self a little like Sparks notes of anything important that happened, anything that came top of mind. I like to do this because it kind of gives me this exit routine from my workday to say, okay, everything that's still going on in my brain, all these work thoughts, I'm gonna get them out on a document, on a piece of paper, and then they're out of my mind. I leave them. I know I'm not gonna forget anything because they're right there. I'm gonna pick it up tomorrow and nothing's gonna kind of get lost, in the cracks of trying to remember something and then having work thoughts linger into my personal life. And so having sort of an end day routine has been really helpful. Also, having this kind of exit routine sets up your first task in the tomorrow of setting up your day and your tasks and having a good idea of your day, kind of sets you up to make that a little bit easier instead of having to sit and be like, oh, what was I working on yesterday? So I always try to strive to set my tomorrow self up for success today, however I can. And so that's just like one piece I like to wrap my work days with, a little treat for myself the next morning of like, hey, don't think too hard. I've got you. I've got this for you. So those would be my 6 tips to helping work better for you. Starting to get into these little habits that I've implemented over the last year, probably year and a half, that I found to be very impactful in my workday. So take it or leave it, whatever resonates with you. Maybe you implement it. If you do, please let me know how it goes. And if there's something that has been really impactful for you within your workday, something that you have made your rule, your routine, your consistency, please let me know in the comments, because I'm always looking for different ways that work for different people and different strategies. So as always, thank you for being here, work besties, and toodaloo.